Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Winged Supernova and welcome back to the Great Ace Attorney Chronicles. In the last episode, we finished the first leg of the trial, and in this episode we're going to carry on with the second leg of the investigation. But before that, I went and I checked in the special content section, because sometimes they like to come up with DLC cases for this game, or at least for the newer games, the ones that were on the 3DS specifically. And I noticed that there are a lot of extra dialogues, including one about a stepladder, of course, that I've missed a lot of. I've missed quite a lot of them. No one has informed me of them, of course. Something hidden there. Examine the fireplace whilst with Susato in episode 5. Did not do that. There's plenty of things. But the other things that I've noticed is that there are little outfits here. There's outfits. Iris's homemade suit, which is very interesting. Nice goggles. Susato's got a dress made by Iris, which is very interesting. Definitely looks more English. And then Herlock looks like he's about to go to a festival in Japan, which is definitely something else. I'm not going to play with those now, maybe off screen if I ever decide to go back and try and grab those accolades. But I also noticed that there are these things called escapades here that I had not ever seen. And there's one for each episode, actually. Stuff that we haven't seen, and it's called the Ranced Magazine. And they're said to be like little short stories based around each individual episode. If someone had told me about these, I absolutely would have done these after each episode, but I did not know that they existed. So instead, I'm thinking that maybe before we finish off the entire Let's Play, after we finish episode 5, we'll go through and we'll do all of these escapades as one last send-off, one last hurrah, as sort of like an extra episode or two maybe for this game. Let me know down in the comments, you guys, if you want to see that or not. I definitely am very interested on doing it, but for right now, let us continue episode 4. So, how much have we talked with you about? We've talked with you about everything. I think we've presented you everything that we could, if I recall correctly. So, the next things that we need to do is visit some of these places, of course. We've got... yes, that's right. We've got the crime scene again. We've got the... yeah, Mr. Vigil. He broke down, of course, as most witnesses do when they are accused of something that they don't want to remember. Trying to determine where we want to go. Why not? We'll just start from the top before we get into the meat of the story again. Might as well. So apparently, I read on the thing that there's something about this shovel, right? So this is probably going to be like way late into the whole shovel thing, because it's apparently just gone on and on and on. But why not? Let's just talk about it. The spade is still here. Look. Please, Mr. Naruhodo, it's not a spade, as I think you well know. It's a shovel. It didn't take long to reignite that old argument. Ah, I have an idea. Let's give the implement a name, like Professor Hairbrain named his tools. Ooh, I never thought of doing that. From now on, then, let's call it Ryunosuke. No. It's clearly much more of a Susato. The old argument has taken a new and unexpected turn, it seems. I do recall clicking on that once in the first game, I think, and them talking about it. I see a ladder back there, but nothing about a step ladder. I wonder if that's something else from somewhere in a different case. All right, so this is just a what to do sort of thing that Ace Attorney is known for. I expected as much. Yeah, for now, until someone tells me to look at specific things, I am going to just continue on my merry way, talking with people as I do. Yeah, we already talked to you, that's right. I don't think we've been here. Yes, we have not. Kazuma, my boy. Time to destroy my voice. No arguments, Prosecutor Asogi. You will continue with the trial exactly as I instructed. Is that clear? Perfectly. It's Kazuma-sama. Defying Lord Strongheart by the sound of it. He never did know when to back down. On your way now, Asogi. My lord. Anything to say to me, buddy? Kazuma. Nope. Seems like it's not the time yet. He left without saying a word. Yes? What are you doing here? Oh, well, I was just hoping to ask you a few questions, if you wouldn't mind. I wanted Van Zieks' trial concluded today. But Prosecutor Asogi's unwelcome inquiries are going to make it take longer than necessary. Unwelcome inquiries? As a result, I'm losing even more precious time. Currently 2 hours, 55 minutes, and 41 seconds. 42, 43... Then we must resolve everything before 3 hours have passed, Mr. Naruhodo. In a miraculous not even 5 minutes? Anyway, I can't let the man's obvious bad mood put me off. I need information. And that we shall get before I wrestle it from your dead corpse, Lord Strongheart. Does Prosecutor Asogi believe that Lord Van Zieks is the Reaper? I wouldn't know. It was 10 years ago, in that fateful closed trial, that Lord Van Zieks made a name for himself among the judiciary. But the next trial he fought, he lost. It meant the ringleader of a criminal organization was acquitted, thanks to all the jurors being under duress. But that's awful. The man's freedom was short-lived. He lasted just 3 days. Yes, let me see. He died in a rock slide at his place of work, I believe. Correct. That was the inauguration of the Reaper of the Bailey. And people believe Lord Van Zieks was responsible? He was brought to trial himself, but it was shown to have been an accident. So he must have had a solid alibi then. Nevertheless, the mysterious deaths continued. In total, 16 persons perished in unusual circumstances, ostensibly at the hand of the Reaper. That's a long run of coincidences. Well, the Reaper's true identity may well be revealed by this trial. And the impact that revelation would have on the British public cannot be understated. Is that why it's a closed trial? Precisely. Speaking of, this country hasn't seen a closed trial for 10 years. So the last one was the professor's? The trial of Genshin Asogi? Correct. Actually, we heard that originally you were going to prosecute that trial yourself, Lord Strongheart. Van Zieks entreated me to relinquish the prosecution to him, that he might avenge his brother's death. And here we are, 10 years later. With the son of the man Van Zieks had condemned now looking to avenge his father's death in the same way. They do say that what goes around comes around. However, it would seem that the new young prosecutor is harboring some ulterior motive as well. Kazuma is? I like my organization to run smoothly, to the exact manner that I prescribe. As with the giant clock in here, I won't tolerate a single cog being out of step with the others. Ah, so that's what all these gears are about in here. If the young man refuses to mesh with the other parts of my great machine, I will be forced to take steps. That's threatening. What do you mean? Not something with which you need concern yourself. It's gonna concern me at some point. In any case, all your questions will be answered tomorrow. I'm starting to not like you. Not at all, you fucking bitch. Now I shall have to ask you to excuse me. As of this moment, I've been delayed from attending my next meeting by precisely 3 hours. Oh my, that is a long time. And I hold you entirely responsible, even though we miraculously managed to fit everything into not even 5 minutes? I wonder if you might agree to us, talking with Prosecutor Asogi? Discussions between the defense and prosecution outside of the courtroom are generally frowned upon. However, I will make an exception in this case. Now go! You can find him in his office. Oh, thank you. Alright, bye, bitch. Let's go to see him at once, Mr. Naruhodo. Kazuma's my best friend in the world, but I'm really not at all sure I know how to talk to him at the moment. I suppose we'll have to figure out how to talk to him at the moment. And we'll talk to him later. Waterloo Hotel! Hello, Iris. I thought it yesterday, and I think it again today. This place is so princely. I forgot that we were taking her to see Susato's dad. It's a wild guess, but I have a feeling you'll think the same tomorrow, too. My tea has a finer fragrance than whatever they're serving in the room here, though, wouldn't you say? Ah, look who we have here. This is an unexpected pleasure. Ah, Father! Ooh, is this your daddy, Susie? How lovely! What a charming young lady. And you are? Uh-oh. Here we go. Ah, really? So you're the author of The Adventures of Herlock Sholmes, are you? That's me, Iris Wilson, at your service, sir. Susie's been such a wonderful friend to me over the last year, you know? Well, Miss Wilson, I must say I read your work regularly and with much interest. Iris actually lives with Mr. Sholmes, you know, Father. Is that so? Well, perhaps that goes some way to explaining that bright look in your eyes. Hehe. You wouldn't be smiling so airily if you knew just how bright she is, believe me. Now then, young Naruhodo, it was a pleasure seeing you in action earlier. As an invitee of the symposium, I was allowed to observe from the gallery, after I twisted some arms. And I must say, it was a truly exemplary performance. Oh, well, thank you very much. Although I'm fairly sure you omitted by Kazuma on the end there. No, please don't misunderstand. It was you who impressed me. Really? You didn't miss a step against Asogi, and we all know how capable he is. Really, to have matured into such a fine defense lawyer in less than a year is quite extraordinary. It's very kind of you to say so, and really nice to hear. What I saw in court today confirmed what I'd been hoping for. In the favor I mentioned yesterday, Naruhodo, I trust you haven't forgotten? Oh, no, you did mention something, didn't you? But first, we have something to report, Father. Of course, of course. Shall we take tea while we discuss matters further? I wonder where Judge Jigoku has got to. It's a good question. Don't know what he's doing in the background, do we? We don't know much about him either.
Father, do you know about the so-called Reaper of the Bailey?
I've heard rumors. Some members of the judiciary explained it all to me yesterday. Of course, when I was a visiting student here in London, the Reaper was yet to emerge.
Right, he didn't appear until after that case when visiting students had already returned home.
Lord Van Zieks, who was in the dock today. That was Barrack, the younger brother of Clint Van Zieks, I believe.
That's right, and he's known throughout London as the Reaper, as you've heard. But the truth is, it wasn't him behind all of those mysterious deaths. It was somebody else.
I see. So what you're saying is, there's been a professional killer at work here?
Exactly. Someone by the name of Asashin, in fact.
I beg your pardon? Did you say Asashin? You mean that Giselle Brett woman who was responsible for killing my great friend?
Oh no, a friend of yours was killed?
Uh-oh, here we go.
Professor Mikotoba, I think perhaps we shouldn't discuss this right now. Because the friend the professor is talking about is Dr. John H. Wilson. And that's not something we want Iris to find out about. Not like this, anyway.
You have to tell her at some point. Oh, God. You have to tell her at some point. I mean, come on. She deserves to know.
I've just remembered something. Biscuits! This hotel has the most delicious looking biscuits.
That was rather out of the blue.
She's doing this deliberately. I think I'll go and see if I can purchase some. I wonder, would you like to come too, Iris? Oh, yes! You just try to leave me behind.
Good, good. So that young girl is called Iris Wilson, is she?
Yes, that's right.
And she's the author of all those adventure stories starring the great Detective Sholmes? But the name of the credited author isn't Iris, is it? It's Dr. John H. Wilson.
Yes, I know. That's the name of her father, you see.
Her father? Dr. John H. Wilson. I was deeply indebted to the man for all of the kindness he showed me during my time in London. That's why I was keen to reciprocate and invite him to the Imperial Yume University 4 years ago.
But he was murdered last year by Giselle Brett. Why? Why would the hand of the Reaper stretch all the way to Japan? Iris knows nothing about that case, but it seems very likely that the victim, Dr. Wilson, was her father.
Well, I can't say that we ever spoke about his family, so I don't know if he had a daughter or not. But I think I can say with some certainty that he was never the great detective's partner.
So it could have been another Dr. Wilson, you think?
Well, John and Wilson are both common names after all. Still, it's probably best not to mention this to the young lady until we can be sure.
That's what we thought, yes. We're back with cinnamon biscuits! Ooh, they smell delicious, Iris. I think cinnamon will go very well with the tea they serve here, don't you, Susie? Yes, I'm sure you're right, Iris. Wonder if that mystery's gonna be solved anytime soon. I haven't seen Judge Jigoku for a while, have you?
Guilty! Ha 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 ha!
But that guilty is still ringing in my ears.
No, now you mention it, I haven't seen him since this morning either. I suppose since the symposium's opening was postponed, he'll have gone to explore at the Great Exhibition. That reminds me of something you mentioned yesterday. About Judge Jigoku having once been in the dock himself? Ah, yes, it was all tied up with that accursed trial.
The closed trial of Kazuma's father.
Seishiro was trying to mitigate Genshin's guilt, so he took to the stand to testify. But he got a little carried away and, actually managed to break the witness stand.
Oh my!
He also said some contemptuous words about the British Empire, for which he was charged.
Oh dear. Although it's worryingly easy to imagine him doing that.
Well, it was all right in the end. He was acquitted and we returned home to Japan together.
Thank goodness.
Ah yes, talking of Seishiro, I have a copy of the photograph we all took together here yesterday. Please.
Please don't enter this as evidence. Oh, what a lovely picture.
It certainly seems to shout, "We've arrived in Britain." Oh no. This is never a good thing. Whenever they enter something so basic and so normal into the court record, you know it's never gonna be nice. Something's gonna happen to one of these four. Oh no. Oh boy. None of us had any idea what was coming when we took that, did we?
No, that's so true. So, you mentioned a favor that you'd like to ask me.
Well, this fateful trial that you're fighting, one way or another, it will be over before long. And when it is, I'd like you to accompany me back to Japan.
You want me to do... What? Father, what's the meaning of this?
Now, Susato, you should understand. You've seen how our courts work firsthand. Japan's judicial system is in its infancy, especially when it comes to defense.
Oh, you mean...
The Supreme Court of Judicature is in desperate need of a good defense lawyer. As soon as possible. Really quite urgently, in fact.
But I've not even been in London a year yet.
I've read all of Susato's reports. I'm well aware of your extraordinary talents. And having seen you in action with my own eyes earlier today, there's no question. You, Naruhodo, are precisely the man our country needs.
So, you'd be leaving then, Runo? But then, what am I supposed to do, Father?
You came here to serve as Asogi's judicial assistant.
Oh yes, she's supposed to be Kazuma's assistant.
Our government is still in the process of deciding how best to deal with his situation, though. You've always chosen your own path, Susato, and I trust your judgment. In this matter also.
Father!
Please, the pair of you, don't look so downcast. It's merely a suggestion, you understand. A hope, if I'm honest. But I won't force you. All I ask is that you consider it, and come to a decision by the time this trial concludes.
Yes. All right. You won't leave, will you, Runo? The thought hadn't even crossed my mind. Up until now, I've just been trying to do what I believe to be Kazuma's will. But it turns out that he's still alive, so where does that leave me? I don't know. I always had a thought in the back of my mind that this whole game would eventually boil down to a final trial in Japan, right? For some reason or another, I always thought that it would boil down to a final trial in Japan. So I feel like maybe possibly, the next case is going to be like 2 different cases in one, potentially. And we're going to get the first half in England, and then the second half in Japan. That's just my thought on the matter. I have no freaking idea where this is going whatsoever. And I'm so glad that I've stayed unspoiled about it for the past 7 months. Oh god, this has taken a while for me to finish, hasn't it? Well, if you'll excuse me now, I I need to telegram government ministers and the Japanese police with this information about Asa Shin.
Of course, Father. Thank you.
I look forward to next month's installment, Miss Wilson.
Oh, good. And please, do come to Baker Street sometime, won't you? We'd love to entertain you.
I would be delighted. The best of luck for tomorrow, Naruhodo. And give my suggestion your full consideration, won't you? Yes, I will. Going back home? Well, that was a heavy conversation in more ways than one.
You know, Kazuma-sama has always meant a great deal to my father. I'm sure he'd love the chance to meet with him and talk to him about all of this.
Yes, no doubt. Asa Shin.
Of course, it's so obvious.
Oh, it's Sholmes. I was wondering who it was. Asa Shin. Of course. It's so obvious. How could I have neglected to consider the possibility before now? Ah, Mr. Sholmes.
Hurley, where have you been?
Why, I joined you all for tea, of course. What an extraordinary question.
I didn't notice you at all.
No matter, no matter. Anyway, to more pressing concerns. Mr. Naruhodo. Oh, yes? I must dispatch a telegram to your country at once. It is a matter of much urgency. To Japan, you mean? Tell me, to whom can I entrust the task? Quickly now, who?
Well... My father has just now left to send a telegram to the Imperial Police Bureau of Japan himself.
I see. Well, he looked reliable enough for a bearded fellow.
I don't think what father sports could be considered a beard, Mr. Sholmes.
There's not a moment to lose. Kindly ask your trusty unshaven father to see this is sent.
I will, but what is it?
No questions at this time, if you please, Miss Susato. All we can do is pray that for once, my deduction is awry. Doesn't that imply that your deductions are normally correct, Mr. Sholmes? Which isn't exactly... Now then! You may be surprised to learn that I am a very busy man. I certainly have no time to hide behind settees and eavesdrop on other people's conversations. So that's what joining us for tea meant. I leave the sending of this in your hands then, my dear fellows. Okay, see you later, buddy. Wait a minute, Mr. Sholmes!
He just sort of ran off, didn't he? At quite a pace.
And left the unpaid bill for his tea behind, too.
I must catch up with father at the telegram office at once. And I'll run and call us a cab, straight away.
And there was me thinking everyone would be clamoring to pay Mr. Sholmes' bill. Well, I guess we're going somewhere else. Let's go back to the crime scene. Why don't we? I don't know exactly what else we can do here, but maybe find something. Maybe these guys have something else to say? No, they do not. I did not see the check mark before I clicked. I can check these things. Using a candle as a timer device. Very ingenious, I must say.
Yes, the culprit arranged it so that the firecracker would be set off at 5 o'clock and then left.
So that a loud bang was heard at precisely the moment Lord Van Zieks arrived, yes. If only he hadn't picked up that gun from the floor.
Something you probably told yourself once upon a time, I imagine.
Yes, I've learned that lesson by a bitter experience. I would have turned and run for a mile for sure.
Which may not have done you any favors either.
If it turns out that Gregson didn't actually die here at all, where on earth could he have been killed?
Well, one way or another, we must find out, for the inspector's sake. You know, you look awfully pale again today, Mr. Naruhodo.
Sorry. When I start thinking it all through, I conjure up some horrible images in my mind.
Your imagination is the culprit here, then. Most certainly guilty.
It catches your eye as soon as you enter the room, doesn't it?
It's such a bright color, it certainly makes an impression, yes.
They can't possibly commit any crimes, can they? I mean, redheads stand out like a sore thumb.
I'm afraid with our jet black Japanese hair, we stand out almost as much here in London.
I suppose that's true.
You mustn't think of committing any crimes, Mr. Naruhodo.
I wasn't! I'd never have imagined that this little figurine would turn out to be a watch-winding key.
I suppose it's a policeman because the pocket watch was a gift from Scotland Yard. It seems there was much more to Inspector Gregson than we ever realized. He was clearly a brilliant man.
It's the fish and chips that threw us off. I feel as though it ruined his image.
I really don't think we should blame one of Britain's staple cuisines.
But think about it. Imagine if it was Mr. Sholmes. How would you feel if instead of that old briar pipe that's always in his hand, Mr. Sholmes had a bag of chips?
Rather disappointed, if I'm honest.
Exactly. This revolver, just who does it belong to?
Well, we know it's of the type issued to members of the police force and judiciary.
But Gregson's owned gun was found on his person.
And of course, Lord Van Zieks has admitted to losing the firearm with which he was issued. Such absent-mindedness, not dissimilar to you, Mr. Naruhodo.
I'm starting to think the cold, hard prosecutor and I could become friends after all.
Then I wish you every success.
Have we talked to Mrs. Vigil? The photograph of Mrs. Vigil.
Realizing the identity of this lady was a very great clue to exposing Mr. Gossip's true identity. He obviously loves his wife very dearly, which is why he felt he couldn't tell her the truth.
The transformation was incredible, wasn't it? Just from that big, twisted lip.
Yes, he went to extraordinary efforts to play the part of Hugh Boone convincingly.
Although, it didn't really seem like it was much of an effort to me.
Now you say it, I have to agree.
It's almost as if that was Mr. Vigil's true character.
People really are very hard to fathom at times.
Which is why you have to doubt them. There are details of cases stretching back over 10 years on this notice board. Yes, a history of Lord Van Zieks' defeats in court.
I don't think that's an appropriate description. Although, when you consider everything on the board, it's certainly true that all these people had a background of dubious dealings.
And in the end, of course, the board itself concealed the inspector's own death.
Oh my, it really doesn't bear thinking about.
Nothing on that desk, nothing on that lamp, nothing on that chimney. I think we've checked everything in here. Nothing quite yet, as it happens. Sadness. No new clues. Oh well. To our first new location. Mr. Vigil's hospital bed. Oh god, it's the same room. St. Sinner's Hospital, Ward 3.
This is the ward where Mr. Vigil was brought, apparently.
To be frank, I'm a little worried about seeing him again. Well, there he is. The lawyer. Hello again.
Are you feeling better now, Mr. Vigil?
Yes, thank you. Somewhat better. I'm so sorry to have caused you to... I mean, it was because of me. If I hadn't exposed your secret and forced you to remember things you'd obviously tried to forget.
The prosecutor was here until a few moments ago, too. You just missed him.
Oh, Cosmo beat us to it.
He said much the same as you. He was very apologetic. But the truth is, I brought all this upon myself.
Please, don't think like that.
Keeping it from Evie, my wife, all these years, I've carried such a sense of guilt. But that's not the worst of it. Over time, I obviously came to deceive myself as well.
You mean about your dismissal?
Looking back now, I'm beginning to think that perhaps Inspector Gregson didn't stumble across me by accident at all. I mean, he compensated me so generously for acting as his stand-in. He was clearly concerned for my well-being and doing what he could to help.
So perhaps Gregson knew exactly what had become of Mr. Vigil all along then.
I'm sure this is just desserts for 10 years of lies and deception, but
isn't it 2 S's? Because it's just desserts, like the food? I don't know.
It wasn't me that helped the professor escape 10 years ago. It wasn't me. I swear it. I swear it's true.
Oh, Mr. Vigil.
I'm sure you'd rather not dredge up even more from your past at this time, but if possible, could you tell us exactly what really happened?
I want to. I need to get all this off my chest. I just want someone to tell me what I should have done.
Okay, well, I suppose that's what we'll do then.
Inspector Gregson was obviously engaged in a special operation of some sort. He was investigating something that even Scotland Yard couldn't know about.
Details of the Reaper's marks, yes.
It was when he had to carry out those investigations that I would take his identification and impersonate him.
You'd pretend to be the inspector and carry out investigations on his behalf.
Oh no, never! A common street peddler couldn't possibly carry out a proper police investigation. All I would do is go to the specified location and make a little hoo-ha. Just something to leave an impression, so everyone there would think a detective called Gregson was here.
So, that's what you were doing on the day prior to the incident?
Yes, he asked me to make an appearance at the park on Lime Street for the Red-Headed League event. So, as usual, I flashed the inspector's identification around and was very vocal about my presence.
But then you were taken prisoner by those red-headed fraudsters.
Yes.
So you would always make a point of showing Gregson's identification and generally being loud?
That's what the inspector asked me to do, yes.
Well, that's one way of becoming a legendary detective, I suppose. Not a good one, though.
And as you know, I suffered this bruising around my neck at their hands. But the following day, they kept their word and released me.
Without returning the inspector's identification to you, however.
We had arranged to meet in the Fresno Street room at 5 that day so I could report back to the inspector. But at the agreed time, that's when I heard the gunshot. It was at midnight on the 17th of June 10 years ago. That was the time scheduled for the execution.
But the professor's execution never actually took place, did it?
Or rather, the execution itself must have been used to effect the plan of escape. I hardly dare to imagine what a chilling plan it was.
Barclay was renowned for being the highest security prison in the country. Everything that went in or out of the place was searched multiple times. But there was one notable exception. Or rather, one notable loophole. Something that was never questioned.
I have a feeling I know what that loophole was now. The coffins into which the bodies of the executed convicts were placed, correct?
Yes. Once the coroner had confirmed the death of a condemned convict, the body was taken in its coffin for immediate burial in Lowgate Cemetery just behind the prison. The chief warder first had to sign the necessary papers.
And after that, no members of staff were permitted to touch the coffin containing the body again. When executions took place, only the executioner and the coroner were permitted inside the chamber. I would wait in the adjacent room for word that the condemned convict was dead. On that occasion, once I had that confirmation, I went into the mortuary to find a lone coffin as usual. The procedure was that I would sign the paperwork having checked the coffin, then nail it shut. But for some reason that day, the coffin was already nailed shut.
No!
I didn't think anything of it at the time. I assumed that my deputy must have checked the coffin and nailed it shut before I arrived.
So, you mean the coffin contained...
Yes, I can only imagine that Asogi, having escaped his execution somehow, was alive inside the coffin. The coffin was then taken out through the main gates and deposited in Lowgate Cemetery.
Presumably, there wouldn't have been enough air inside to breathe for long.
So in the early hours following the burial, somebody dug up the coffin again to set Genshin free.
But in the end, he was fatally shot in the graveyard anyway. What on earth really happened in Lowgate Cemetery that night, I wonder?
I'm afraid I really don't know. All I can say with certainty are two things. Asogi couldn't possibly have escaped that way without help from somebody working in the prison. And that somebody was not me.
Well, the first one that comes to mind is, of course, the coroner. Considering that they have to check to make sure that the body's dead, and, I mean, all you have to do is just check the pulse, right? You gotta check the pulse and then probably a couple of other things that I'm not privy to because I'm not a medical student, but... yeah. That would be very easy to tell that someone's dead, I would say. Obviously, you knew the man then. The professor, I mean. Genshin Asogi.
Yes, I remember him well, in fact.
Would you mind telling us what you know?
Well, having been condemned to death as he was, any contact I had with the man was short, obviously. And after that trial, which was carried out behind closed doors, attended by only elite members of the judiciary, they called for his execution to be carried out at the earliest possible opportunity.
The outcome of the trial was set from the beginning, wasn't it?
It was a time of delicate diplomacy when Britain and Japan were in the process of signing an important treaty. That meant that this potentially destabilizing case had to be dealt with swiftly and discreetly.
The man had less than a week in total. As I was the chief warder, I oversaw his short stay in the cells until his final hour. I remember being struck deeply by his noble character and incredible resilience.
What do you mean exactly?
He was a killer of many men, but he was always quiet and polite. He was a gentleman and a man of intellect. In fact, I couldn't bring myself to believe what he'd done, so I asked him one day. Those 5 members of the aristocracy whose lives were taken, were you really responsible? I'm guilty of the unforgivable crime of ending another human's life, yes.
That's a very vague way to say that. That doesn't mean that you did it. I mean, you ended a man's life from what I can grab from that. But that doesn't mean that he killed all 5. The following day, the closed trial took place, and the verdict was no surprise. Guilty. That night, when he was brought back to his cell, I saw something. Something unusual. Something unusual? What? The last will and testament of Genshin Asogi. Oh boy. Here's an extra piece of the puzzle that we didn't know about. As I said, it was on the night following his trial, after he'd been found guilty. I was doing the rounds of the cells, and when I looked into Asogi's, I noticed that he seemed to have a sheet of paper in his hand. Ah, his last will and testament then, presumably. As soon as he noticed me, he hurriedly shoved it behind his back.
But why did you find that so unusual? Isn't it normal for a man to pen a will when he knows his death is nigh?
Yes, that's true, but there were special conditions to Asogi's incarceration, you see. What sort of conditions? Well, even though he was held in a cell designed for condemned inmates, he was allowed to keep his personal effects with him, with one exception. Really? He was allowed his things? That is unusual, certainly. Of course, he'd been convicted of killing 5 members of the aristocracy. But at the same time, he was a guest in our country from the Empire of Japan. The powers that be were determined that his final days shouldn't be needlessly uncomfortable.
And what was the exception you mentioned to the personal effects he was allowed?
The sword, right? That's the point. He wasn't permitted to have writing materials. Oh, that's odd. Specifically, no pens or paper.
So he was prevented from leaving any written record of what had happened to him?
Yes, that was the long and short of it. But I've no idea where he obtained that paper. Any writing materials would have been confiscated from him upon his incarceration. As I said, he hid the paper behind his back, and then he pleaded with me. What did you just hide behind your back? Please, please turn a blind eye. This is my lifeline. But you know it's against the rules. You're the only person who's seen. If you just agree to keep quiet. All right then, but what's on that paper? A last will and testament. This will is the only weapon I have left now. Maybe we'll turn that up. How can a will be a weapon? I want to know if you told Kazuma that, though. Because Kazuma's definitely going to want to go after that because he's his son. So I pretended I'd seen nothing, and I let him keep his will. But then later, it just seemed to vanish without a trace. What? What do you mean it vanished?
It would seem that isn't the end of the story of this mysterious will.
It's somewhere. We just have to find it. I was the only person who saw Asogi's will, but somehow it disappeared. It was after Asogi's execution.
Which was actually an elaborate jailbreak.
The warders gathered up Asogi's possessions that were in his cell. They were all to be sent back to his family in Japan, you see.
To poor Kazuma-sama.
And you're saying that it wasn't anywhere to be found among his personal effects? The will, I mean. That's right, though I didn't search through them myself. But Governor Caden was livid. He was screaming, "It can have disappeared completely!"
That doesn't quite make sense though, does it?
In what way?
Well, we'd understood that only Mr. Vigil was aware of the will's existence. In which case, how did the prison governor know to look for it?
Oh, yes, you're right. I really don't know how he knew. But it certainly seemed as though he knew of the will's existence from the outset. Only he didn't refer to it as a will. What he said was, the Asogi papers. The Asogi papers? I really can't tell you anything of the subsequent events. Because, well, of what happened. Your dismissal, and the way you blocked it all from your memory. I'd forgotten all this until today. I don't suppose it's relevant to the case, though. Well, anyway, thank you very much for sharing it with us, Mr. Vigil. We're very grateful. I'm afraid there's really little more I can tell you. My wife, Evie, will be here shortly, so I do hope I don't appear rude, but... No, not at all.
Thank you again.
But what will become of you now?
Well, impersonating a police officer is a criminal offense, of course. I imagine that once I'm fully recovered, I shall be arrested. I'm so sorry. Don't be, please. This was all my own doing. I always knew that this day would come. Well, I wish you well. Goodbye, Mr. Vigil. Before you go, there's just one thing. I'm not going to scream. Oh, yes? What is it? The Asogi papers. I'd be very grateful if you'd make no mention of the things I told you about them. Presumably for some good reason. It's my understanding that their very existence is a closely guarded secret. If it became known that I'd remembered, well, it could be rather troublesome, I think. I understand. So we've got to do some snooping around without actually asking about them? That's going to be tough. Some sort of will that Genshin Asogi penned just before his death, which the man himself claimed was a last weapon. I wonder, perhaps it had something to do with his plan to escape. If there's anyone who might know more about a document that Kazuma's father left behind,
It would be Mr. Vigil's governor.
that's what I thought, but we don't want to really ask him straight up about it, do we?
Then we know precisely where we must go. Back to Barclay Prison.
Well, let's examine a couple of things real quick. I can't examine that. Can I examine something over here? There's some crutches. Ah, look, a pair of crutches. Before we came to Britain, I hadn't realized they were used here as well.
I imagine they were imported into Japan from Great Britain in the first place.
Oh, so no one in all of Japan broke a leg before their arrival? Anyway, the sight of these things doesn't bring back good memories for me.
Oh dear, did you injure yourself once and need to use them?
When I was little, I thought they looked fun, so I borrowed a pair to play with. Don't tell me he broke his leg and had to use them for real. But then I slipped and sprained my ankle.
I see.
They contained powerful magic, those wooden staves, the power to heal, and the power to harm.
I think a certain cheeky little boy managed to cause the harm all by himself.
Cheeky little boy. That's funny. What's on this? Ah, patient treatment notes. What did these say, I wonder? Endlessly obliging. I suppose that's referring to the patient in this bed.
I would think so, and until Mr. Vigil is a little more stable, it's probably just as well that he has a kindly person in the neighboring bed.
The endlessly part is a little worrying, though, isn't it? I mean, what if Mr. Vigil suddenly declared that he'd like to take a trip out of the window? Would this endlessly obliging patient simply open it for him and say, "Be my guest"?
Let's check with the doctor later.
Let's not. Give me a flashback to Danganronpa 2. These must be the patient's treatment notes. Let's see. Tendency to jump from windows. Remember to place cushion at base of wall outside. Aren't we a story up from the ground here?
Oh dear, poor Mr. Vigil.
I can't help feeling there's a better solution to the problem than a cushion, though. How about making sure the window's locked? Finding something you'd lost isn't always a happy experience, it turns out. Pursuing the truth can be a very dark business sometimes, can it?
Yes, I'm afraid it can.
Well, I don't think there's much else. Let's check this, why not? This notice caught my eye before, actually.
I suppose it's some sort of slogan for the ward? A cheerful welcome message, perhaps.
Let's see. Pay with good cheer, leave with good cheer. Well, look at that. You were spot on, Miss Usato. It is full of cheer.
I wonder how many discharged patients pay their medical bills with good cheer, though.
Once I had to have a very painful injection when I fell ill with a cold. I felt awful already, so why did I have to suffer the sting of the injection as well as the bill? I yelled at the doctor.
Oh dear, what terrible treatment.
Oh boy. Early modern medicine. What a time to be alive. Alright, well, I think... Yep, nothing in this corner. I think that's gonna be it for now. And in the next episode, we're gonna get to go to the prison governor's office and also to the prosecutor's office to speak with Kazuma-sama. Fantastic. Oh boy. So, with that being said, thank you guys very much for watching. Feel free to leave a like and comment down below if you really want to see these those extra episodes that they have at the end of this playthrough. And yeah, that's it for now. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.